I'm not giving up.
I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either going to be okay.
No, stop!
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.
Akamai Cloud, GPUs for agentic AI. Bring AI inferencing closer to users everywhere. Get started at akamai.com/GPU.
This is the Tudors Dynasty and Beyond podcast. History with a twist. And now your host, Rebecca Larson.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm Rebecca Larson, and well, look, he came back again. Matt Lewis is here. Welcome back, Matt.
Like that cockroach infestation you just can't get rid of. I'm back again.
I keep spraying, but the spray isn't working.
I'm enjoying the roving reporter look. Are you off out and about today?
I'm on scene today. if you're not watching the video, you don't know what's going on. But if you're watching the video, you see I'm holding a microphone today. I have a complete backup system happening because my sound mixer fried out during a storm yesterday, so I had to improvise today. So on scene is Rebecca.
I thought we were just doing like a breaking news style episode. Breaking news: there's a 9-year-old baby on the throne of England.
Yeah, well, you're so much quicker than I am. I should have come up with that one on my own. Well, I was thinking today before we got started, I thought, gosh, Matt comes back. He knows all of this history. I'm convinced now that you lived during this time. You're like 500 years old today. You're looking pretty good, but you must have experienced this history firsthand.
I feel like I'm 500 years old today. I think I probably know this stuff better than I know my own life. I couldn't tell you what I did last week, but I could tell you what Henry VI was doing 500 years ago.
Isn't it crazy? I was just telling a girlfriend yesterday. I was like, I forget everything.
He wasn't doing very much, actually, because he was dead 500 years ago. Maybe I should have gone 600 years ago. I could tell you what he was doing 600 years ago. I mean, I did just tell you what he was doing 500 years ago. He was having a nice lie down.
He was taking a good long nap. Yeah, as we get older, we don't remember things as well as we used to. We only remember the things that are important to us, right? Which is history.
I remembered to turn up today, look. Have you forgot I was coming because you've got your random roving microphone like you were off out somewhere? So I know where I stand now. This is important to me, Rebecca.
Sorry, it's clearly not important to me.
I know, I get that. I keep coming and I keep trying, but...
Well, I appreciate your effort, Matt.
A for effort, D for content.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so last week before, actually, you had a week off from me. You lucky dog.
You've had a week off from me. We know which way around that goes.
That's true. We talked about Henry V. And so this week we're looking at Henry VI, and I feel like we're just flying through these medieval monarchs. And I've said this so many times, I feel the end is near, and it's making me kind of sad. So maybe we're going to try and...
You wish the end was near.
I keep going, can we just skip ahead? Can we skip ahead to Richard III now?
How many more of these are there?
I didn't know I signed up for this.
I'm like one of those magazine subscriptions that you turned out to be 427 parts to build a silly little model plane.
That's right.
That you didn't want in the first place. That's exactly what this is.
I didn't ask for this.
How do I cancel?
I keep saying cancel. Okay, anyway, so we're talking about Edward. You got me all thrown off today. We're talking about Henry VI today, and I think we decided to break this into two parts because there is just so much to cover with him, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, he's king for a long time. He manages, I mean, depending on how you measure it, 40 years, maybe 50 years he's on the throne because he has a nice little break somewhere along the way. And he's just so bad, and there's so many bad things that happen, and there's so much we could say about him that's unpleasant and not very nice. I thought I'm going to come back and say it twice. It's guy's going to get the slating of his life.
Oh, geez. Poor Henry. Well, I feel like this happens when we have a week off, that I kind of forget how the previous monarch ended. Obviously, Henry V died. That's how that ended. but, but where did we talk at all about Henry VI in that, and him coming to the throne after the death of his father, or is that where we start today?
It's nice to know our chats are so memorable. 1 week off and you've forgotten everything I ever said. We talked a little bit about, so Henry V dies in 1422 in France while he's on campaign, and he sets out his plans as he's dying for what's going to happen to his kingdom, because his son is 9 months old. He's a few days short of his 9-month anniversary. It's not his birthday. Well, he's a few days short of being 9 months old when his dad dies.
We're in trouble
I'm
today.
Confusing myself. It's too hot. It's too hot here, Rebecca. I can't do this.
I have no excuse.
My roving mic.
You should have.
This next episode is coming from the pool somewhere. So Henry V, as he's dying, sets out his plans for how he wants his kingdom in England and the land that he's taken in France to be ruled. He wants his oldest surviving brother, John, Duke of Bedford, to be regent in France. He wants his youngest brother, Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, to be regent in England. Everybody's pretty happy for Bedford to rule France as a regent, but the council in England are having absolutely none of Humphrey being regent there. The English, they don't really have a system of regency. It's not a position they recognise. They're not used to it the way that it happens in France. And I guess the tricky point is, so the general view of Humphrey is that everybody thinks he's an incompetent idiot who's not up to ruling. But I can't help wondering whether what you've got on the council is a whole bunch of people who think we've got, maybe 15, as many as 20 years of this child king, during which we can feather our nests. And if we let Humphrey have complete charge of the government, then he's going to absorb all of that patronage that's going begging. He's going to have all of that power and authority. And what are we going to be left with? And I think the council are kind of sitting there thinking this is too good an opportunity to pass up. All we have to do is override the will of a dead king, which the Tudors will tell you is doable.
Yeah.
And so they create this entirely invented system to deal with a child king. They create a situation in which the council is going to rule. So there's going to be this large group of men who are going to have control of the government. The person of the king is put into the charge of a tutor. That seems to change hands in his early years fairly often. It may have been Thomas Beaufort who was initially placed there. It will later be Richard Beauchamp, the Earl of Warwick. And that person is responsible for educating him, teaching him how to become a king, teaching him how to become a soldier. Spoiler, none of them do a very good job. And Humphrey is kind of given this like pat on the head, booby prize made up award. Does that sound familiar? And he's appointed to the post of protector, Lord Protector of the realm, which they've just made up. And essentially the powers that he's given with this is that he's given a prominent position on the council, so he will take part in government, but not solely. He will have to work with the rest of the council. And he's in charge of kind of national security. So I kind of frame Lord Protector as like chief of police, if such a thing existed in the medieval world. And it's very much like giving him a sheriff's badge, telling him he's a good boy and letting him go and play. They've sidelined him from the position that his brother wanted him to have. Whether that's because he's genuinely not up to it, or whether that's because people want to take advantage of the situation, isn't really very clear. But what Henry V wanted to happen doesn't happen. And maybe if what Henry V wanted to happen had happened, things might have turned out a bit differently.
Maybe. You just never know with history, do you? Sometimes I think things are just inevitable. It's going to happen one way or another when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. And how often have we seen, if you can remember any of the kings that we've talked about previously, how often have we seen where you get this fantastically successful warrior king who is followed by someone who is less than competent? It's about to happen again.
Yeah, there is just this pattern that keeps happening with these monarchs. I mean, I think we went back to originally Edward the First and Edward the Second, right? And we went there.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it keeps happening. So we have Henry the Sixth. He succeeds the throne. Just how old was he again? 6 months?
He's nearly 9 months old. A few days short of being 9 months old.
Yeah, so he's just a babe. His mom is we have to talk about her too, because we're coming into this situation with Catherine of Valois, and she's this hot French princess.
Well, yeah, I mean, and she's married Henry V as part of this arrangement that made Henry V regent of France and heir to the French throne on the death of her father Charles VI, and almost immediately, within a very short time, she finds herself as a widow. And she's what, 21 when Henry dies? Yeah. She's got a whole life ahead of her. And this is one of the two major problems that Henry VI's regency government tried to confront while he's a baby. So Catherine of Valois is 21 years old. She's a widow. There's every chance that she's going to want to marry again. Yeah. There's every chance that her father will want to find her another significant match somewhere. Or what if she marries some English nobleman? There are even rumours beginning to emerge that she's having an affair with Edmund Beaufort, who is one of Henry VI's cousins. And the reaction of the government to this is to literally change the law to prevent Catherine marrying again. They're so terrified of the influence that any kind of a stepfather might have over this boy. If she's having an affair with Edmund Beaufort and they decide to get married, there is a man who is going to have so much power and influence over the king as he grows up. Yeah, which is part of what makes me think that they didn't want Humphrey to have that kind of influence as well. They clearly don't want anybody to have it to themselves. And if she marries a foreign ruler, what kind of influence is that going to give them in England while the king's a baby? It's a really difficult, tricky situation. So they essentially changed the law to say that if a dowager queen wants to remarry, she has to have the permission of the council for the choice of her new husband. And if she doesn't get the permission of the council, if she marries without that permission, then the man that she marries forfeits all of his lands and titles and incomes. So it makes her a really unappealing runaway bride.
Yeah. Who wants to marry that, right?
Let's go to Gretna Green and get married. Well, let's not. And this is obviously a reaction to the fear that she's going to marry. Maybe it's Edmund Beaufort. We don't know for sure. But Catherine will find a way around this. She, depending which story you believe of how they met, falls into the lap, literally, of the handsome Welshman Owen Tudor. And the advantage for her of marrying, and again, lots of discussion about whether they're married or not. I'm not going to bother getting into that. I think they probably were, and I don't really care, if I'm perfectly honest. But the bottom line is she marries someone who has nothing to lose.
Exactly.
So the council can take away all of his lands and properties because he's got like 3 peas growing in the back garden and a manky old donkey. Have them. I've just got a French princess.
He's like, you can have Phil back there with a donkey.
Take him away, guys. I'm moving Catherine in. Seems like a fair exchange.
Oh, this is going in a great direction, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, so I was thinking that immediately when you said, if she marries anyone, they're going to take away their land and those things. And I thought, well, that really explains why she married Owen Tudor, because he didn't have all of those things that a wealthy nobleman would have had, or a foreign prince. So it kind of worked out.
Yeah, and there's lots of stories that he's, an incredibly attractive, charismatic Welshman, much like Nathan Amin, I imagine. He's got that kind of vibe about him. So there are reasons why Catherine would fall for this guy, but he has the added benefit of he's willing to marry her because she's a French princess. He's a man from Wales, and he's got nothing to lose. There's nothing for the council to take away from him.
Yeah.
And they'll go on to have, children who obviously become prominent much later on. Edmund and Jasper in particular, there's lots of questions about whether they had 1 or maybe 2 more children as well. who knows? But Edmund and Jasper will become hugely significant later on in the reign of Henry VI.
Okay, so Henry VI is still a baby, toddler, we'll say. His mom gets married to, I'm just going to say, some nobody from Wales.
Oh, it's no way to talk about Nathan. Oh, no.
I am not throwing stones. I'm not starting a fight between me and Nathan Amin. This is all on you. I'm just saying. So his mom is now married. He's still a toddler. What does life look like for Henry VI? Obviously, he's not ruling as a toddler. He's got other people doing it for him, but his uncle is kind of sidelined. He still has his other uncle over in France, right?
Yeah, so you've got the situation where Bedford is in France. And just to add your complications and difficulties to this, about 6 weeks, 7 weeks after Henry V dies, Charles VI, the King of France, also dies.
Oh, right.
Which theoretically makes Henry, at just over 10 months old, also King of France. I mean, this is a lot of pressure for a baby.
It is, really.
This guy's going to need some counselling to get himself through this. He's maybe going to be a bit stressed out. Just the two kingdoms to run at 10 months old.
But
obviously, he can't press that claim. So he's relying on Bedford. He's having to rely on Bedford to maintain the situation in France. And I think Bedford is thinking, I've got to keep things fairly stable until Henry is old enough to come over here and continue his father's work.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen. But Bedford does actually an incredibly good job. He's quite a good governor in France. Things initially go quite well there. You get some victories in battle, you get some losses in battle, and we can definitely get to that in a second because it all gets complicated. But he's reliant on Bedford in France, who is doing quite a good job. The council in England are busy, theoretically trying to rule. I would question whether some of them are lining their own nests and making hay while the sun is shining. And it seems like everyone has forgotten to teach Henry how to be a good king. He's given a tutor, but it seems to change hands fairly frequently, and no one seems to do a very good job of it. They're not involving him in government. We saw something similar with Richard II, who was a little bit older when he comes to the throne, but he is the focal point of everything, and he's told that he has all of this power, but actually everybody else is exercising it for him. And everyone forgets to explain to Richard II what's going on in his name. And I think they do the same with Henry VI as well. They forget to gradually involve him and explain to him what's going on as he gets a little bit older. And obviously, he's still a small child. He's not expected to rule, but he needs to understand what decisions are being made and his part in all of that, and how he's going to grow and how his life is going to change. And it feels like no one bothers to do that. Almost certainly gets no kind of military training. You think about the dangers of learning to fight. This is a guy who is going to be wrapped in cotton wool and then 3 layers of bubble wrap and put in a jiffy bag and popped in a cupboard till he's old enough to look after himself. They simply won't teach him how to fight because it's just too dangerous. So how is he ever going to turn out like Henry V? He can't govern and he can't fight. It's going to be a real problem for him.
Yeah.
And I did mention earlier that there was kind of 2 things that were exercising the royal council. One of them was Catherine of Valois. The other thing that I think is concerning them is the continued existence of the Mortimer family. So here you've got, at the moment, Edmund Mortimer, the 5th Earl of March. And if you can cast your mind back as far as the Richard II episode that we did, we talked a bit about the Mortimers potentially being considered the heirs to Richard II, having a better claim to the throne than the House of Lancaster. Henry IV managed to fend an awful lot of that off. Henry V was fine with it. He was so successful it wasn't particularly an issue for him. Edmund Mortimer exposes the Southampton plot to assassinate Henry V, so he clearly doesn't want to be on the throne. But now you've got a baby. The government is fragile and it's vulnerable. And I think suddenly the Mortimer name becomes a real cause for concern again. We see a guy named John Mortimer. His connection to the main branch of the Mortimer family isn't very clear, but he's kind of thrown into the tower and then executed for trying to escape from the tower. And I can't help wondering whether that's a little bit of a message being sent to the rest of the Mortimers to keep your heads down if you want to keep your heads on.
Yeah.
Edmund is, he dies in 1425, so he only survives a few years into Henry VI's reign, and he dies in Ireland as Lord Lieutenant there. But at that point, all of his lands and titles pass to his nephew, and his nephew is Richard, Duke of York. Mm-hmm. So now all of a sudden you've got this incredibly powerful royal duke who is inheriting possibly a better claim to the throne. And I suspect that Henry is partly brought up kind of with this unspoken fear of the Mortimer name. Maybe he doesn't really understand what all the grown-ups are talking about when he's a child, but he understands enough to know that Mortimer is a problem. Yeah. And now York is a problem. And this is something we have to think about and consider. And I genuinely believe that this is kind of instilled in Henry from such a young age that it helps to explain an awful lot of what happens in his life, that he views Richard, Duke of York, as some kind of existential threat from the very beginning, perhaps without even understanding why. And he simply can't deal with that threat. So he ends up creating the monster that he feared the most later in his reign. He just pushes and pushes until York becomes what he feared he was all along. So Henry, he's being brought up. He's slowly turning up at council meetings as he gets a little bit older and things like that. But again, he's not got any real power or authority. Bedford, as I said, is initially doing quite well in France. He's maintaining Henry V's gains. We get in 1424 the Battle of Verneuil, which is almost an equivalent to the Battle of Agincourt. It's another huge English victory, really crushing for the French. But after that, things begin to slide, and the English aren't very good at talking about the fact that they lose an awful lot of battles around this time. There are a lot of reversals, and the French are really on the front foot. And this culminates in the emergence of Joan of Arc in 1429, who kind of completely revitalizes and revolutionizes the cause of the French Dauphin, who wants to be King Charles VII, Charles VI's son. And you get a series of reversals for the English. So in June 1429, you get the Battle of Patay. This one's quite interesting. So this is part of Joan of Arc's march across France to get to Reims to get Charles crowned. And there's a really famous knight in the 100 Years' War named Sir John Fastolf. And he apparently turns up at the Battle of Patay, and it's all going horribly wrong. The English are being absolutely decimated by the French. And so he doesn't engage. And one of the other English commanders, John Talbot, who later becomes Earl of Shrewsbury, accuses Fastolf of cowardice, of running away and not involving himself in the battle. And all of this ends up in a massive court case in England, at which point Fastolf is suspended from the Order of the Garter. He's demoted, suspended from the Order of the Garter on the basis of cowardice. Whoa. So it's just my regular mention of the Order of the Garter, just to remind people. Still not there.
I think I heard recently that you got a certificate maybe to become a member.
I did. Someone sent me one. That was very cool. I'm going to get it framed and put up and see if it gets me to St. George's Chapel next time. I'm going to try it. Chance my arm.
Just try it.
I'm going to make my own robes. I'm going to find me some ermine. So eventually in 1442, John Fastolf will he continues to fight this, and in 1442 he'll be restored to the Order of the Garter, and this will be overturned. But again, this is just a symptom of the reversals that the English are suffering. So Joan of Arc pushes on through, gets to Reims. Charles VII is crowned as the King of France, and the English government of Henry VI realise that this is a crisis. How are they going to deal with this? How are they going to counteract this threat to their position in France? And they decide, and this is a huge mistake, and this is obviously with the benefit of hindsight, but what they decide is the only way around this is to have Henry crown the King of France. The issue with this is that he hasn't been crowned King of England yet. So it sparks lots of confusion about the significance of each realm, the precedents that there might be. If he goes and gets crowned in France first, is that the King of France coming to England to get crowned? I'm not having that. Does England become the junior partner? Absolutely not. So then they decide, well, we're going to have to crown him in England before he goes over to France. So in November 1429, when he's 7 years old, just before his 8th birthday, he undergoes a coronation ceremony. I mean, we thought about what that might have done to Richard II when he was kind of 10 years old. Here's a 7-year-old going through that same kind of thing, being told that he is being set apart from everybody else in the realm. He's now hugely important, significant, a bit closer to God than everybody else. Imagine the effect that's having on a 7-year-old boy. And then almost immediately after that's done, plop the crown on his head, whip it off again, and put him in a boat and send him over to France. And they go to Paris. They spend quite a bit of time in Calais. French kings are normally crowned at Rheims Cathedral, where Charles VII has been crowned, but that's now back in French hands. So they've got a little bit of a worry about how they do this. And they end up going to the Cathedral of Notre Dame de Paris and having him crowned there. And that happens in the middle of December 1431, so just after his 10th birthday.
Okay.
So by the time he's 10, he's undergone 2 coronations. He's been whisked over to France. This must be absolute chaos for this 10-year-old boy. And I almost imagine a situation in which he's kind of an afterthought for everybody. It's like, have we got the keys? It's like Kevin McAllister in Home Alone, we've got the keys, got the passports, everybody rush out. Forgot Henry.
Forgot the king.
Yeah. And so again, at 10, he's undergoing a second coronation that is again singling him out as something important. I mean, he's the only person in all of history to be crowned as King of England and King of France in those respective countries. No one has ever done that before, and no one will ever do it again. Just this 10-year-old boy.
It's quite amazing. And I like that you keep comparing him to Richard II, because I think it's just such a true test of, I don't know, human character, how two people can have such similar type things happen to them and how they turn out differently. Richard II obviously had an ego.
But if you think about that nature versus nurture kind of argument,
yeah,
there's a strong element of these two boys having the wrong kind of nurturing for the role that they're going to be expected to fulfill in life. I think their education in both cases is so severely neglected that they're just utterly unequipped for what's to come, which makes it kind of difficult to blame them personally. That they both turn out to be disasters, but you can almost see the reasons for that are beyond their control.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tell me more.
Going out live to Rebecca Larson.
Sorry.
So the next big crisis that hits Henry VI's government is the death of John, Duke of Bedford, his uncle, in 1435. Bedford has, been doing a great job. Nobody is criticising Bedford or suggesting rivals to him. He's the king's oldest uncle. He's doing a great job. It's been absolutely fine. But in 1435, he passes away. And that causes a little bit of a crisis for the government. Who do you send over there? There's some suggestion that Humphrey, the other uncle, was like, well, if I couldn't have England, how about I have France? And they're like, oh, maybe not. And also that Humphrey doesn't want to leave England because he's scared that everyone will shut the door behind him.
Yeah, probably right.
Never get back again. Yeah. And so they initially send over Richard, Duke of York, which is an interesting move, because if they do consider him to be a threat because of his Mortimer blood, it's kind of like, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Richard, Duke of York, by this point is in his early 20s. And I can't help wondering whether there's part of this is about getting him out of the country, preventing him from building a strong affinity in England. He's got all of that Mortimer block of land on the Welsh marches. He's powerful as the Duke of York as well. Is this about, they've been giving him tasks to do. So when he comes of age, they give him this whole list of quests to go on. Your uncle, who you got your Dukedom of York from, owed loads of money to everyone. If you could just sort all of that out. And when he sorts that out, it's like, oh, your uncle was also halfway through building a college church in Fotheringay. Do you think you could finish that off? And it's like they just keep giving him stuff to go away and keep busy. And I can't help wondering whether this is something similar. Get him out of the country, prevent him from building a big affinity while Henry is still a boy, because maybe the Mortimer name is still something that they're going to want to worry about. So York goes over for a year. He's given a post that is called the Lord Lieutenant of France. I mean, it means nothing. It's made up. It's nothing like the regency powers that John, Duke of Bedford had. He's not given any money. So at the end of his year, he's like, okay, that was great. I don't want to do that anymore. And in his place, they send over Richard Beauchamp, the Earl of Warwick, who had previously been one of the tutors to the young Henry VI. And by this point, he's a well-respected elder statesman, but he dies very shortly after getting over there. which throws it all into crisis again. And they revert. There's lots of talk of Humphrey going again, and nobody seems to want that. And in the end, they send Richard, Duke of York, back again, this time for kind of a 5-year period. They enhance his powers a little bit. But even still, he's finding he's over there funding an awful lot of this stuff himself, which may well suit the government in England. If he wants to bankrupt himself paying for all this stuff, let him go for it. But they starve him of kind of men and money. All of the things that we talked about Henry V had learned will ruin any kind of military expedition. That's the kind of situation that York and then Warwick and then York again are left to deal with in France. And then around this time as well, Henry turns 16 and he begins to take a bit more formal control of the kingdom. He begins to start acting in council. He begins to start being consulted about actual decisions and things like that. So here we do see him stepping into his role in government. But by this point, it's pretty clear he's really pious. He's far more interested in religion than he is in governing. He's a quiet person. If he's not the shouty king that his dad probably was, you think about someone like Edward I, they're not getting that. He's a really quiet individual. He seems quite shy. He disliked kind of bloodshed and things like that. There's one story during his reign as well that one of the feasts at court or something, this troop of topless dancing girls turn up and start dancing around in the room. And Henry stands up in an absolute rage and throws them out and complains at how disgusting this kind of behaviour is, and he won't tolerate it in his court. So he's probably also a little bit of a prude, I guess.
Yeah.
And probably all of the other men at court are standing around thinking, uh-oh, we thought it was a good idea to get him a stripper for his 21st. Yeah. Turns out it wasn't.
Turns out that backfired.
Yeah. So, he really early on, he's showing signs of someone who is really not suited to the position that he's coming into, particularly when England is still effectively at war with France. He's growing up into a military commander who has no interest in war or military command.
Not good.
It's not a great condition. And again, it's easy to say he's a terrible king, and he is, but it's also easy, I think, to find reasons why he's not as good as he should have been that aren't his fault. There are things going on that are causing all of this. But he falls into another trap as well, the same one as Richard II, in that he allows a small group of very close friends to begin to dominate his presence, and he latches on to a couple of favourites. And during this period, we'll particularly see Edmund Beaufort, the Duke of Somerset, the man who was at one point accused of having an affair with his mom, potentially, become really close to the king. And William de la Pole, who will later become the Duke of Suffolk. He goes through this series of being promoted he starts off as Earl of Suffolk, later becomes Marquis and then Duke. And he's an older man. He's been really active in the wars in France. He's lost a brother and a father over there. One of his other brothers has been a prisoner for years and years in France. So he knows a lot about what's going on in France. And I think he becomes almost like a father figure to Henry, someone that Henry comes to rely on and respect an awful lot. But alongside that, we've also got the emergence of a couple of factions at Henry's court, which is I guess this is the root of the Wars of the Roses, if we're going to go for a plant analogy. And it starts off really with two sides. So you've got Henry Beaufort, the Bishop of Winchester, who becomes a cardinal. He's a really interesting, fascinating man. He'd wanted to be a cardinal for ages, and Henry V had refused to allow him to become a cardinal because he said, I don't want someone who is answerable to the Pope in the government of my country. You're either a cardinal or you're in power in England. And so he barred him. So almost as soon as Henry V dies, Henry Beaufort is like, oh, cardinal's hat for me. The baby says I can be a cardinal. Lovely. And so he becomes, a cardinal, incredibly influential in England and incredibly wealthy as the Bishop of Winchester, the richest bishop in all of England. And Cardinal Beaufort will come to essentially fund the government in England as it begins to run out of money, which gives him incredible influence and incredible power. And he uses that to promote the fortunes of his Beaufort family. This is where we really see them rising to increased prominence. And Cardinal Beaufort and his faction, want peace with France. They want the end to the war. And being pragmatic, you would probably look at it and think this war is hugely expensive, probably unwinnable. Peace is probably not a bad idea, except that this is 15th century England, in which peace with France is not an option. And this is where also the early decision to take Henry to France and have him crowned king backfires spectacularly. Because to make peace with France, Henry's going to have to give up his claim to the French throne. But he's been crowned. He's been anointed as King of France. How do you undo that without it being hugely embarrassing?
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Yeah.
So the peace party carries an awful lot of influence at court, and it's the one that Henry finds most influential because he doesn't want war anyway. But against that, you've got a faction which is led by Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, who wants to continue and pursue the war with France. And I think what Humphrey wants is the realization of his brother's plans. You know, he can see everything his brother built, everything his brother fought for, and the thing that his brother died for being allowed to just crumble away and die. And also what Bedford, his other brother, had worked so hard to maintain and had died keeping for Henry VI.
Yeah.
This has cost him he's lost 3 brothers to France. And now they're saying they want to just call it quits and walk away. And I think there's also, we talked in the Henry V episode about the Battle of Agincourt when Humphrey is injured and knocked to the ground and Henry literally comes and rescues him. And you can't help wondering whether Humphrey is feeling like he owes his brother. How am I going to repay that life debt? Well, the only way I can do it is to make sure his son delivers what my brother had kind of set up for him.
Yeah.
So for all of these reasons, I think for Humphrey, peace is not a viable option. And so you get this faction at court with the peace and war factions led by Cardinal Beaufort and Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester. And Henry is utterly incapable, as he moves into his 20s, utterly incapable of reconciling those two factions. He doesn't have the power of personality to bring those men together behind him. He can't enforce, if he wants peace, he can't enforce that on the war party at court. He simply can't bring them to terms. And so this rift just sits there and festers and gets wider and wider. And Gloucester is increasingly pushed out of government, excluded from all kinds of things, which makes him feel even more irate and just allows the feud to grow. And then Cardinal Beaufort is making sure his Beaufort relatives, John Beaufort, Edmund Beaufort, people like that, are being promoted up the ranks of the nobility. They're becoming dukes. And Gloucester is just having to swallow this. And Henry's doing nothing to fix it. Tell your uncle, there is no more war, get used to it, or go on crusade somewhere and get out my kingdom.
Yeah.
But don't sit here and cause trouble. But he's incapable of doing that. And we'll get to what happens with the feud a little bit later on. But this is the thing that becomes generational. This is the same feud that will lead to the Wars of the Roses. And Henry has spent decades completely unable to end it, to reconcile it, to deal with it. He allows the Wars of the Roses to just happen around him.
Let's see. He was incapable.
He's just not up to the job. Think about the worst, softest, nice manager you've ever had. He's that guy he just wants to be everyone's friend.
Yeah.
He'll go down the pub with them because he's such a cool guy and they all like him so much. And it's like, but you have a certain role in those positions to bang some heads together when heads need banging. And Henry can't do that. He's incapable. As we get into the 15, not getting anywhere near the 1500s yet, don't worry. I'm not going to take you that. I'm not going to drag you kicking and screaming into the 16th century. That'd be a bit too much, wouldn't it? As we get to the 1430s, there begins to be discussion about Henry's marriage, as he's moving into his 20s. There's initially talk about him marrying a daughter of James I of Scotland. That would be quite a useful union to secure peace on the north border, to allow them to concentrate on France. You've got this old alliance going on between Scotland and France. Scotland will often raid the north of England to distract from efforts in France. So that's quite a good idea, but nothing comes of it. Then in the middle of the 1430s, there's talk of him trying to marry one of the daughters of Charles VII. And Charles VII is really against this idea. He says he'll allow it to happen if Henry VI publicly and permanently renounces his claim to the French throne. But Henry now can't do that without embarrassing himself, because he's been anointed King of France. It's hard to give that up. And I think the French probably are also thinking, well, this would just be a repeat of what happened under Henry V. Marriage to a French princess was the gateway through which Henry V took theoretically control of the country. We're not having that happen again. So it comes to nothing. Later in the 1430s, there's a putative touted match to a daughter of the King of Germany, which again comes to nothing. Early in the 1440s, there's talk of him marrying a daughter of the Count of Armagnac. So Charles VII goes and attacks lots of lands around the Armagnac territories. Like, lovely vineyards you've got there. Be a shame if something happened to them, Count of Armagnac. And the Count of Armagnac is like, maybe I won't allow my daughter to marry the King of England.
Right.
Kind of frightened off. Yeah. The big medieval mafia protection racket is at work in France. And then they try again for a match to a daughter of Charles VII. Henry really wants peace, and I think he views this as a great way to secure peace. The French probably view it as a serious threat. Henry thinks it's a great idea. But nobody can work out how to deal with this issue of giving up the French throne. So what Charles VII does, no intention of allowing Henry to marry one of his daughters. What he does instead is offer a niece of the Queen of France. And Henry seems to be like, amazing, that's almost exactly what I wanted. This sounds really good.
Sign me up.
So that niece is, and we're into the middle of the 1440s here. So Henry is in his 30s now, and he's still unmarried.
Wow.
And he has no heir.
Yeah, that's
and things
worrisome.
aren't going very, very well. Yeah. So the niece that he is offered in marriage is Margaret of Anjou. She's the daughter of René, the Duke of Anjou, who is the brother of the Queen of France. And René is such a fascinating figure. Margaret of Anjou is an incredible woman. She's such a strong queen. She's on the wrong side of the Wars of the Roses for my liking, but I kind of had nothing but respect for her. She does do an incredible job in many, many ways. She makes some mistakes too, but her dad is just a bizarre fellow. This guy is crazy. He's Duke of Anjou, but he has all of these paper titles, sort of nominal claims to titles all over the place. He calls himself the King of Naples. He makes a bid for the throne in Jerusalem, because why not?
Random, okay.
And he completely bankrupts the family, chasing these titles around all over the place and failing dismally. So he's a bit of an embarrassment to the French royal family. So there's a little bit of a snub and a joke and a tease in here in offering his daughter to the King of England. And I guess for René, this is a bit of a coup. His daughter's now going to be the Queen of England. And the match, I said Henry was in his 30s. He's not. He's in his early 20s at this point. This is mid-1440s, so apologies. Okay. I'm giving him an extra decade. Sorry. He's getting towards his mid-20s, and he's still not married. And Margaret is 14. Henry is, heading into his mid-20s. So there's a bit of an age gap there, but nothing out of the ordinary for the medieval period.
Yeah.
And the marriage contract is made, but it comes with a huge secret.
Oh.
And nobody's supposed to know this secret. But it's not a secret they can keep for very long. Margaret is married by proxy. So William, Duke of Suffolk, William de la Pole, stands in France for Henry, married by proxy. And the following year, in 1445, she comes over to England and the couple finally meet, and they're married at Titchfield Abbey. And then there becomes this big issue of how is Henry going to let this secret emerge? Because he's supposed to get a dowry for marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be money in this as well as a political alliance. But Rene's got no money.
No.
So he's not only agreed to take no dowry for this marriage, he's actually agreed to give the entire county of Maine in France back to the King of France.
What?
In return for this marriage. This is a really significant piece of land that his dad had won, and he's just going to hand it back over. There is a realization that this is bad news, so they keep it secret for as long as they possibly can. But every once in a while, in the couple of years that follow, Charles VII is turning up saying, you promised me that land. Can I have it now? And Henry's like, yeah, any minute now. I just need to sort out a bit of paperwork. You know what lawyers are like. It's probably lost in the post. I'll chase it up. Don't worry.
Oh, no.
We'll get it done. And Margaret is increasingly encouraging Henry to get this done as well. This was the legal basis for their marriage. If Henry doesn't fulfill it, does that put their status as husband and wife at risk? Henry's reneging on a contract effectively. So there are lots of issues with, there are English people who've settled in Maine. Lots of the territory in Maine belongs to Edmund Beaufort, the Duke of Somerset, and he's not very happy at the thought of giving this up. And eventually, in about 1446, kind of a year or so, 2 years after the match is made, a year after they're married in person, news of this kind of leaks out. And everybody is pretty furious. Edmund Beaufort is like, I'm not giving up that land. Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, is like, you did what now? You said they could have what?
Oh, no.
He's freaking out at this. And Henry simply doesn't know, again, how to deal with this situation. And again, so this creates another issue that Henry is going to have to solve that is going to blow up in his face. And he's stacking up these issues. He's got huge problems being stored up that he's not confronting, he's not dealing with. And, the pressure cooker is building around him. He's like the frog in the warming water, isn't he? He's not realizing it's about to start boiling. No. And so Henry almost becomes the biggest obstacle to the peace that he now wants, because how does he renounce the throne of France? How does he tell his uncle Humphrey that he's going to give away all of these lands? Well, in 1446, there's a summons sent out for Parliament to meet in Cambridge. And a bit later on, the location of the Parliament is changed to Bury St Edmunds. Sounds pretty innocuous, except that Cambridge is a place that is hugely sympathetic to Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester. He's really well liked there. Bury St Edmunds is the heartlands of William de la Pole, the Duke of Suffolk.
Okay.
If anyone had thought about this smells a little bit funny.
Yeah, it does.
So Humphrey turns up at Parliament at Bury St Edmunds in the early weeks of 1447 and is immediately told that he's under house arrest and he's forbidden to go and see his nephew, the king. And Humphrey must have been wondering what was going on. I mean, Humphrey, he spent years now being excluded politically because of his desire for war. There'd been efforts previously, a few years earlier, 6 years earlier, 1441. There is this huge issue with his second wife, Eleanor Cobham. They're running this almost early Renaissance kind of court, full of books and music and colour and pageantry. Humphrey's library of books was donated and is the core of the Bodleian Library collection. That entire collection is based around Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester's book collection. If you go to the Bodleian, there is still Duke Humphrey's reading room there that you can go and sit in and read the books.
That's pretty cool.
So he's a really interesting character in his own right. But 1441, kind of the government make an effort to deal with him a little bit because of his opposition to all of this peace. And they target his wife, Eleanor Cobham, and they come up with a story that she's been engaging a witch in order to forecast the date of the death of the king, because the king still has no child. Humphrey is still his heir. his closest living male relative. And so they're saying Eleanor Cobham is trying to work out when the king is going to die so that her husband can become the king. And that's treason. You're forecasting the date of death of the king is treason. And they accuse her of going to this lady named Marjorie Jourdemain, the Witch of Eye. And Eleanor doesn't deny this. She says, I did go and see Marjorie Jourdemain. I was trying to get some fertility medicine from her so that I could have a child. You know, my husband and I don't have any children. And I was trying to conceive. But they hit another one of these legal issues that they had with Catherine de Valois, where they want to try her for treason for forecasting the date of Henry VI's death. But there is literally no legal mechanism to allow them to try a woman for treason. All of the treason laws only apply to men.
I didn't know that.
So they have to try her for witchcraft, for forecasting the death and working with the Witch of Eye. And she's found guilty of witchcraft and is sentenced to do penance. And also she's required to have her marriage to Humphrey annulled. And then she lives the rest of her life until 1452. She lives the rest of her life in prison if she's never allowed free again. So Humphrey is kind of, I mean, this is a pretty clear message to Humphrey. Poor old Eleanor cops for all of this, but I think it's very clearly a political message to Humphrey to wind his neck in and that he's losing power and authority here. And then the government also changed the law so that treason applies to women from this point onwards.
They're like,
so
we need to fix this.
Henry VI, yeah. The punishment for a man who is convicted of treason or a nobleman is beheading. An ordinary person is hanging. The punishment for a woman who is convicted of treason is to be burned at the stake, the same as a witch.
Whoa.
But obviously they can't do that retrospectively to Eleanor. So this is the point, in the middle of the 15th century, in the reign of the utterly incompetent and apparently quite nice Henry VI, that women can now be burnt at the stake for treason.
Wow, things have
it's
been
just bizarre developments.
Yeah. Things are changing during the reign, aren't they?
Yeah. And so back to 1447, Bury St Edmunds. Humphrey is in his lodgings, wondering what on earth's going on. A couple of days later, he's visited by members of Henry's court to be told that he's now under arrest. He's going to be taken into custody, charged with treason for plotting the murder of his nephew, Henry VI. And they claim to have intelligence that he'd been raising forces in Wales and that he was planning to bring them to Parliament, assassinate Henry and make himself king. And Humphrey's like 56, I think, at this time. So Henry is imagining that his 56-year-old childless uncle is going to murder him and take his throne. So either there's one of two things going on here, I think. Either this is a blatant setup, a complete stitch-up as an excuse to charge Humphrey with treason. And let's be clear, charging someone with treason at this point means killing them, executing them.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel, maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
Or Henry is getting so paranoid and so scared of what's going on around him that he believes his uncle is going to have him assassinated. So we've now got a situation where Henry is either sly and vicious and cruel, or he's paranoid and scared. Neither of those is a very good thing for a king. No. I'm not sure which one I think it is. I tend to think it's more like the paranoia.
Yeah.
We'll see later on that he will have met some mental health issues. The question is, how early does that begin? Is this the beginning of all of those problems? But Humphrey never faces trial because a couple of days after he's arrested, he's found dead in his cell.
Oh, no, not this again.
Exactly. The uncle of the king has died, you say? What does that remind you of? There are lots. So the official story is that he had a stroke brought on by the stress of the situation, which isn't impossible. But there were contemporary stories that lingered for a very long time that he'd been poisoned, that he'd been killed to silence him and finally deal with him. And so again, we've got the situation where Henry is potentially ruthless enough to be having his political enemies eliminated, or at least scared enough to allow them to be arrested and probably ultimately executed. One of the other interesting developments in 1447 is that York is back in England to attend this parliament from his time in France. His commission has come to an end again, and he seems to have expected to be sent back as Lord Lieutenant of France again with a renewed commission. He hasn't made arrangements really to pack up and leave France altogether. But he doesn't go back to France for the whole of 1447. And it's kind of Christmas 1447 when he's eventually told that he's no longer Lord Lieutenant of France. He's not going to get that job back again, because that job is being given to Edmund Beaufort, the Duke of Somerset, probably in compensation for the lands that he's losing in Maine. So if Somerset will give those lands up, he gets this swanky new title to be in charge of France. York is instead made Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, and this is quite often seen as exile for York, the idea of sending him to Ireland. But, it's the second most important role in the kingdom. It's not really a political snub, but it is now a demotion for York. He's had France taken away from him, despite the fact he's done a reasonably good job over there. He's performed well. France is taken away from him, given to Somerset, and York instead is sent to Ireland. And here we can see a bit of personal rivalry potentially between Somerset and York. But the real problem is that in the immediate aftermath of the death of Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, all of his popular support for the war party are casting about for a new figurehead. Mm-hmm. And what Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester had always done when he complained about being excluded from government and complained about the peace process and everything else, he always said, I'm being excluded just like the Duke of York, and then would list some other nobles that had been excluded as well. But the Richard Duke of York was always top of his list of other people who was being excluded from the government. I'm not entirely sure that York was very grateful for this. There's no evidence really that he's involved in the war party. He's taking part in peace negotiations in France. He's involved in the marriage between Henry and Margaret. He escorts Margaret across Normandy to the English coast. But Humphrey sees him as someone else who's being excluded, who he can say, and York, and someone else. It's not, all of these people. So when Humphrey dies, all of his supporters immediately go, well, the next guy on the list is the Duke of York. And they throw all of their weight behind him. And for York, this is a problem, I think, because he knows he's got that Mortimer name. He knows that when Humphrey dies, York is most likely to be considered the next heir presumptive, the next senior royal male in the kingdom. And now all of the popular war party that had cost Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, his political position and probably his life, are rallying behind York. And I imagine him thinking, I'm not sure I'm up for this. This is not the party I wanted. Thank you very much. And part of this, I think, is the reason why he decides to take up his position as Lord Lieutenant of Ireland in person. He goes to Ireland. And I think this is an effort on his part to get out the way, to put his hands up and say, I don't want any of this. I haven't asked for this. I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to look like a threat. I am just going to go to Ireland and try and do a good job over there. Please don't worry about me. But I think if Henry's paranoid enough to think that his 56-year-old childless uncle is going to kill him and take his throne, what's he going to think about the Duke of York with all of that Mortimer claim that he's been brought up to be worried about? York is married with children by this point. Henry's still childless. And now his heir, the person that most people will probably consider to be his heir, is no longer a member of the House of Lancaster who might be positioning himself as loyal opposition. It's now outside. The line of succession has moved outside the House of Lancaster because of what Henry has done. He's creating his own worst nightmare, I think.
Yeah.
And this is maybe feeding his paranoia. And the other issue is that within weeks of Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester dying, his bitter rival, his uncle, Cardinal Henry Beaufort, the Duke of Winchester, also dies. So if he was thinking he got the last laugh, it didn't last for very long. But all of his kind of peace faction then passes to the rest of his Beaufort family. So that Henry Beaufort, Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester feud has turned into an Edmund Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, Richard, Duke of York feud. Yeah. Kind of without either of them really particularly wanting it. And now Somerset has taken France from York as well and pushed his nose out and had him relegated. So you can see those personal rivalries. It's become generational now. Mm-hmm. And it's being set up for all of the problems that are going to come. And still, Henry is there doing absolutely nothing to solve this. And I'm kind of going to And so we've got a situation in England where William de la Pole, the Duke of Suffolk, and Edmund Beaufort, the Duke of Somerset, are kind of in charge of government. They're the closest people around Henry. They're the biggest influences on him. York is off in Ireland. I think trying to keep his head down and get out of the way. I think other people will interpret it differently, and that's absolutely fine. You're free to be as wrong as you like. But I wanted to end. We're going to take this up to kind of 1450. Why I'm in the 16th century today, Rebecca? It's your roving mic. It's thrown me. It's so futuristic.
Bringing you ahead a century.
It is. I want to end this in 1450. So I do an entire hour-long talk about the year 1450 because it's so significant. There's so much that goes on. I'm not going to talk for an hour about it now. Don't worry. I can see the panic on your face.
Yeah, thank God.
But it's often overlooked as a real kind of moment, a real turning point in Henry's reign. So I'm going to go through the highlights of 1450. Not that any of them are really highlights. And we're going to start off on the 9th of January 1450 with the murder of Adam Molyn, who was the Bishop of Chichester. So we're going into New Year with the murder of a bishop.
Great start. Okay.
He's in Portsmouth. He's going to board a ship over to France, and a bunch of disgruntled soldiers there beat him up and murder him. And he'd been clerk to the Regency Council when Henry was a young boy, and he was currently keeper of the Privy Seal. So a significant figure in Henry's government.
Okay.
And a bunch of soldiers are so disaffected with Henry's government that they're willing to kill a bishop who they see as the representative of it. Before the end of January, Parliament opens after its Christmas recess, and looks like it's about to go about its business as it had left off before Christmas, when all of a sudden the Commons bring a petition to have William de la Pole, Duke of Suffolk, charged with treason. And Henry is like, what? No.
What's happening?
No, he's basically my dad at this point. What? They accuse him of selling England to the French, so being in collusion with the French and giving away all of the lands over there, and threatening the throne in England as well. The really interesting thing that comes out of this attempt to have him found guilty of treason is that they also claim that William was trying to get his son John married to Lady Margaret Beaufort in an effort to put him in line of succession to make him the next king. So in 1450, we have a situation where Lady Margaret Beaufort is viewed as a legitimate path to the throne. So for all of the talk later that the Beaufort claim is illegitimate and it's really tenuous and everything else, in 1450 they're trying to accuse someone of treason for using the Beaufort line as a path to the throne. So
interesting.
Just saying.
Yeah, that's good.
Henry panics, and William de la Pole does a really good job of defending himself in Parliament. We see the back and forth. The documents are all there in the Parliament rolls, but the Commons are having none of it. They're determined they're going to get their man. And so Henry intervenes, and he exercises his royal prerogative to take over the case. And he finds William innocent of all of the charges of treason. Surprise, surprise. But I think he recognises that there is a problem here. He can't just sweep all of this under the carpet. So he finds William guilty of some minor financial mismanagement, a bit of financial corruption. Naughty boy. And he exiles William for 5 years. And I'm not sure this is ever a punishment more than him trying to protect William. Get him out of the way for 5 years and then hope everyone's forgotten. You think about Edward II having his favourites sent off into exile. It's not something that kings ever imagine lasting.
Yeah.
They're going to work to undo this as soon as they can. So he's almost certainly working to save his friend's life, but he's defying Parliament's authority and the justice that Parliament wants. He's essentially subverting the course of justice to do this. And towards the end of this session of Parliament too, there's an MP named Thomas Young who stands up in Parliament, very brave man, or stupid, stands up in Parliament and says, "Oi, Henry, you've got no kids. How about you just admit that Richard, Duke of York, is next in line to the throne of England?"
Brave.
And Henry blows up. Like he goes absolutely mad. You get the sense this is one of the rare moments where he really loses his temper. He closes Parliament. He has Thomas Young thrown in prison in the Tower. And Thomas Young will later get compensation because this is a breach of his parliamentary privilege. He's allowed to say whatever he likes in Parliament. He has to get compensation for it later. But again, it points to for me, the fear that Henry very clearly has of Richard, Duke of York. Whether that's justified or not, maybe I'll let other people decide. But as we move through 1450, there's a lot happening. We're only getting to the spring. 15th of April, we get the Battle of Formigny in France. And this is a huge crushing loss for the English. Fresh army they've sent over there is defeated. Almost everybody is either killed or captured. And the English are driven out of Normandy off the back of the Battle of Formigny. So Somerset has lost Rouen. He loses Normandy. He eventually gives up the city of Caen as well, which causes a huge problem. The city of Caen belongs personally to Richard, Duke of York. And Edmund Beaufort hands over the keys to the French. So we can see this personal rivalry really becoming entrenched and based on so many different things that are going on. On the 1st of May, the date comes at which William de la Pole, the Duke of Suffolk, is required to go off into exile. So he climbs into a ship. He's written this letter to his son, John, and the letter survives. And I really recommend, listeners and watchers, go and find a copy of this letter. You can find it online. It's such a sweet letter. He's saying, I'm going to miss some of the formative years of my son growing up. And here's all of the advice that I wish someone had given me about being around royal power and royal authority. This is how you should behave. And he also says, while I'm not there, listen to your mum.
Oh, I love that.
It's such a sweet letter. Please go and find it and read it.
Yeah.
So he sets sail on the 1st of May, and out in the Channel, his ship is met by a big ship named the Nicholas of the Tower, and this is quite often used as a royal ship. So he's perhaps thinking, last minute reprieve, brilliant. Henry's going to let me off. The men board his ship and they drag him down into a small rowing boat at the side, stick his head on a block and chop his head off. There is no reprieve for him.
Wow.
And his body is dumped on Dover Beach and his head put on a spike next to it.
I was not expecting that.
No. So if we've got a murdered bishop, huge trouble in Parliament, and now we've got a murdered duke as well. As the summer goes on, we get into an episode called Cade's Rebellion. Another fascinating episode, but essentially this is disaffected people from the southeast of England in something not dissimilar to the Peasants' Revolt. They all gather on the south of London. They send all these documents to Parliament, which is meeting in the Midlands at this point, complaining about the state of England, the state of the war with France, the way that England is being governed. And unfortunately for everybody, they start saying, that Duke of York seems like a really great guy. Maybe you should get him involved in government, which is not what Henry wants to hear.
Oh, no.
And so Henry, if we think about what Richard II did with the Peasants' Revolt, he rides out in front of them and offers himself as their captain. What Henry does is raise a force of 20,000 men.
Uh-oh.
He has no intention of talking to these people. And he rides south from the Midlands. He sends the Duke of Buckingham and a couple of the earls ahead of him to take part of the army against them. And the rebels keep sending these documents listing all of their complaints and their problems. And they're gathered on Blackheath. They hear the royal armies approaching and they kind of withdraw from Blackheath. But this was a trap, so the army follows them. They ambush them in some woodlands, kill loads of this army and come back to Blackheath. And Henry is now like, well, I've done everything I can possibly imagine how to do. I'm just going to go back to the Midlands and see what happens. So he essentially abandons his capital city. The rebels make their way into London. They hold London for several days. They execute a couple of noblemen while they're in there. Lord Say and Seal, who was the royal treasurer, so blamed for all of the financial problems. And this is only ended when there is a huge battle on London Bridge after a few nights that lasts throughout the night. It starts in the early evening. They fight all throughout the night, and London Bridge at some point during the night is set on fire as well. So mate, you've got this blazing, London Bridge is covered in buildings at this point.
Yeah.
Blazing with fire as these two sides are fighting on the bridge. The rebels are eventually defeated and driven back. They end up going home. Cade is chased down and eventually killed. And then murdered bishop, murdered duke, taking control of London. And then also kind of in the midst of all of this as well, we get the murder of William Ayscough, who is the Bishop of Salisbury. So let's chuck in our second murdered bishop this year.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
This guy is Henry VI's confessor. He had officiated at the wedding of Henry and Margaret. So why people are upset with him is probably sending a very clear message about what people don't like, about what's going on in the country. He'd also been involved in the witchcraft trial of Eleanor Cobham, which people weren't overly impressed with. And he celebrates Mass at a church at Eddington in his diocese. And as the service comes to an end, all of the congregation rush him. They drag him outside, drag him to the top of a hill, and they beat him to death.
What?
And then we're told that all of the congregation rip off shreds of his episcopal robes covered in blood and take them away as kind of trophies of what they've done. They leave his body there on the top of a hill.
Brutal.
So we're now on 2 murdered bishops, a murdered duke, and a popular rebellion taking control of London. In September of that year, Richard, Duke of York, returns from Ireland. And I would suggest he's come back because he thinks he can help. There is absolute chaos in England, and something needs to be done about this. But he lands in Anglesey to find that Henry has sent soldiers to arrest him.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Why? What? Paranoia much? I think so. I think Henry is utterly terrified of York. Even if York is coming to help, maybe he's coming to try and challenge Henry. I don't think so. But Henry clearly is terrified of York by this point. York gets back to London, only to find that Somerset, who has botched the job in France, lost all of Normandy, given away York's city of Cannes, has been appointed Constable of England and is now, in the absence of Suffolk, Henry's chief advisor and right-hand man. And I think you imagine him like face palming and being like, how bad do these people have to be before Henry realizes that something's going wrong? So again, I think you can see the scene has been set for this personal rivalry between York and Somerset. They're being forced almost into conflict. Somerset is now the direct representative of a government that is terrified of York. Parliament opens in November that year. All of the nobility are bringing huge armed retinues to Parliament because obviously everybody is terrified about what's going on. Nobody feels safe and secure. Parliament sits and York arrives to it a few days late. I think trying not to look like a threat again. I'll just slip in quietly at the back. But one of the things that Parliament discusses is the royal debts, the royal finances, which are the royal finances are in a terrible, terrible state. They can't get meat delivered to the royal kitchens because butchers in London know they won't get paid for it. It's getting really bad. And the Parliament rolls tell us that Henry's income at this point was about £5,000 a year. And he's currently in debt to the tune of £372,000.
Whoa.
Which is about £170 million in today's money. And, many, many times his annual income. So there's just no way to fix this. This is the state that England is in under Henry. York arrives a couple of weeks after Parliament has opened. Maybe he wants to make a dramatic entrance. Maybe he wants to slip in and not appear to be a threat. He's not making himself the centre of attention. But in early December, we get riots in the streets of London again while Parliament is going on. Edmund Beaufort is attacked and robbed at Blackfriars. Who saves Edmund Beaufort? Who restores order in London? It's Richard, Duke of York. He rides through the streets of London demanding an end to the rioting. He catches one of the people who attacked Edmund Beaufort and has him executed. And the big question, I think, at this point is, can York end this trouble because he started it? For effect? To try and make a point? Did he cause Cade's revolt? Is he causing this riot in London? And is that why he can bring it to an end so easily? Or can he bring it to an end because he's actually an effective and strong governor? And that's what this country's been missing. And what people wanted is someone to turn up and say, no, stop it, pack it in, or I'm going to bang your heads together or cut your heads off, whichever it is.
Yeah. But
he's essentially saved Edmund Beaufort's life at this point. And so you get to the end of 1450, and what we've had, 2 murdered bishops, a murdered duke, the loss of all of the lands in France that England hold, apart from Calais and Gascony, a popular uprising that's taken control of London. London Bridge has been burnt down. There's been riots in the streets during Parliament, and a Parliament that's criticising the people around the king, as well as all of his debts as well. And the rifts in England are so plain to see. We get one foreign merchant who's in England at the time, who is writing back home saying that, there's two parties in France, one for the Duke of Somerset in England. Sorry, there's two parties in England, one for the Duke of York and one for the Duke of Somerset. So they can see clearly what's happening. They can see this divide, but Henry still seems utterly blind. And this is still 1450. Bear in mind that the Wars of the Roses hasn't started yet. But the stage, I think, the scene has been set. The foundations have been laid for the real problems of Henry's reign. All of this is going to seem like nothing when we get to the next part of his reign.
Wow. Everything seemed like it was going in such a good direction with Henry V, right? And then he dies suddenly and his son comes to the throne and he's too young. And here we are again in one of these situations where a young king sits on the throne. Men want power. Fighting starts. Who's the enemy? Who's not the enemy? I feel too, like, I find it very interesting that at this point we do not yet have Henry VI going through one of his, I'm trying to think what they call that. I'm just going to say one of his phases where he's catatonic or whatever. He hasn't done this yet.
No, we haven't even got there. We haven't got to all kinds of crises that are going to develop over the decade that follows 1450. But that I think 1450 is so interesting because so much goes on. But each of those moments, each of those crises was an opportunity for Henry to grasp the nettle, to take control and to fix the problems in his kingdom. And he continually neglects to do it.
Yeah. I feel like we went through this first half basically, and I feel like I see the Wars of the Roses so much clearer now and see where things kind of started to go in the wrong direction. And it does sound like it has a lot to do with him being ill prepared to be a king and trusting the wrong people. And, what do you do? I feel like you can't blame the poor guy, but also he made some bad decisions and maybe he just should have trusted different people than he did. And I'm looking forward to the next half of his life in the next episode.
It's amazing that this is almost the easy part of his reign.
Yeah.
This is the least crisis filled portion of his reign. The worst is yet to come.
It is yet to come. I feel like the next part is the part of the story we've heard so many times. And so I'll be interested to see what your take of that side of the story is, since you also have studied, obviously, Richard, Duke of York so extensively, that this will kind of give us a new viewpoint of history. So, yeah, Matt.
And I hope a lot of that episode has just been really good groundwork for the Wars of the Roses to come, to understand where the rifts have come from and why there is so much tension and conflict and so many problems in England.
Yeah, I guess I've always been so torn on when did it officially start, because I used to always think it started with Henry IV. Like that was the beginning of it, but it does kind of seem like this is when the two houses started to really fracture and turn against each other. So looking forward to the next part. Well, Matt Lewis, thank you so much for joining me again today to teach us about yet another medieval monarch, and I can't wait to finish his story next time.
Thank you very much for being our roving reporter, Rebecca.
Thanks for having a good sense of humor about it. And that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty and Beyond podcast. This podcast would not be possible without the wonderful support of my generous Patreon patrons. If you'd like to become a patron, you get commercial-free episodes, early access, and exclusive content. Head over to Patreon, that's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty for more information. Until next.
Tires matter. They're the only part of your vehicle that touches the road. Tread confidently with new tires from Tire Rack. Whether you're looking for expert recommendations or know exactly what you want, Tire Rack makes it easy. Fast, free shipping, free road hazard protection, convenient installation options, and the best selection of Continental tires. Go to TireRack.com to see their Continental test results, tire ratings, and reviews, and be sure to check out all the special offers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.
Are you one of those media strategy people clicking through slides, scrolling spreadsheets? Yes? Good. This is for you. Because on Spotify, there's an audience that's different, locked in, loyal, invested. They're called fans. Fans don't just listen to music, they feel seen by it, like it belongs to them. So when your brand shows up on Spotify, that's who you're talking to. And you're right next to artists like me, Lizzo. So, are you ready to talk to fans? Spotify advertising. You're among fans.
Next time,